All right.
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And the first item on our, we don't have any minutes. So the first item on our agenda is the public comments. And I am looking out there to the vast audience tonight. And we don't have any public comments. Does anyone have any comments? No comments?
Well, I'd just like to comment. I'm wearing blue in honor of the Oregon game because clearly I have just as much sense of school colors as they do.
Well said, sir.
Yeah.
So tonight on our agenda, we have one public hearing, and this is an item that was continued, I believe, from the November 26th?
December 8th.
18th. 8th meeting, right? Wasn't the December 8th meeting? And it is SP 1416, Site Plan and Design Review, CD 1401, Code Interpretation, Similar Use Determination, US 1405. See if we got any more here. Property addressed at approximately 2002 Washington Street, near the intersection of Highway 213 and Prairie Schooner Way. And I would ask, have any of the commissioners visited the site?
I haven't specifically visited. I've seen it and driven by it many times.
Likewise, I've visited, driven by it, been to Home Depot more often than I'd like to admit.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to the site today.
Okay. And I am also have been to the site and am very aware of its location and the site-specific location for this particular application. So should I open the public hearing?
Sure.
All right, so we're going to open the public hearing, and I do have to read this, I believe, into the record. So we have, this is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. So I read all the file numbers before, scheduled for us tonight, and staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each of the applicant's proposals. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code, and the hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart to my right. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence shall be directed towards the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply. We also have the wonderful speakers cards, which are at the back of the room, and please hand those to Laura, all of you folks out there. And then that way you will be notified of the city's final decision on this particular item. Any person may submit any written material while the record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to be part of the record. If a person intends to use PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to the staff, they will not be included as part of the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision in which you agree with, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised in consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both, without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and the parties can respond. The issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So we'll now open the record for Oregon City file numbers, I stated, CU 1416, CD 1401, and US 1405.
Or you could just say PC 14143.
Yes, well, that's the staff report number. All right.
Applicant, thank you very much. The applicant has submitted an email requesting a continuance for this hearing until January 26th, which is the next planning commission hearing, and they've also provided an extension of 14 days to our 120 date. The applicant had a few words to say as well.
Good evening. My name is Dana Krafchuk. I'm a land use attorney at Perkins Coie. My address is 1120 Northwest Cooch, Portland, Oregon 97209. I'm sorry to even have you have to come here this evening just for the continuance. Yes, you will get back by halftime. Just the way procedurally, when we realized we didn't have our entire team available, we had to convene in order to continue the hearing. So I am terribly sorry. But since I've got you here, I did watch the tape from the last time when we had the continuance, and it did seem like there were a few questions, and I don't want to get out ahead of ourselves before we put on our entire evidentiary proceeding in a couple of weeks. But if there was anything in particular that you're curious about or you definitely would like us to focus on, I can bring that back, and I will have representatives from America's Tire with me at the next hearing, as well as our engineer, so that we're hoping that at that hearing that we can get through the entire process and get a decision that day. So in order for me to be prepared, if you'd like to raise any issues or talk about anything, I'd appreciate hearing it.
Gentlemen?
I just have one brief one, which is actually for staff. In reading over your pre-application conference notes, which of course you have to double tap this thing, there was a reference to the stores needing to face the dominant street, and then it says in parentheses McLaughlin. Mm-hmm. Was that supposed to be Washington, or is there a special McLaughlin overlay? That's what I wasn't sure about.
Typo. That would have been a typo. There's a couple of findings regarding orientation in the staff report. There's one that says it has to face the street, and then it has to be oriented towards the higher designation street, which would then be Highway 213. So they essentially did a series of two fronts, one on Prairie Schooner Way and then one on Highway 213. I did speak with the planner that did the pre-app, and I asked her that same question, and she was meant to refer to Prairie Schooner Way.
Okay. Because I was going to say, it's a long way from McLaughlin, and I'm not aware of any special overlay, so.
Well, maybe they really want to be on McLaughlin.
So, okay, that was the big question I have. The others I suspect you'll be able to answer at the meeting, so, and it's nothing of significance at this point.
Zach, do you have anything?
Nothing specific.
No.
Robert? No. So I guess one of my questions was, why that location?
Well, I am sure that the America's Tire folks will be able to answer that for you, but I do know, just in my conversations with them, how committed they are to this location. They see it as a terrific location for them. The synergy with the Home Depot, I think, is part of it, and just the volume of traffic that goes by. They really want the Oregon City Market. They have a store in Clackamas. They have some other stores in the area. The fact that the construction methodology that's going to be needed because of the methane and the settling, that added a couple $100,000, both of those categories to it, and the design details that I think we're going to be able to offer you were a few more $100,000. So the price tag has risen on this, and they're still very committed. So I think that underlies to you their commitment to the city and this region, and they think this is a perfect site for it. From a land use perspective, and we'll get into this, it's a uniquely zoned site, particularly given its location, and the presence of the methane does limit the types of uses that can be there. Like food-oriented uses can't be located, so not the entire menu of what's allowed otherwise in the MUD zone could go there. And so I think that the Planning Commission is also in a unique position of saying, on this site in this zone, what is the best fit? And we think that this tire store is a good retail use for the site, which we'll describe.
I know it doesn't have a lot to do with the criteria, but in terms of the site plan and design review, that what did cross my mind, because I am, a little bit aware that there are substantial costs, whereas if they were elsewhere, for instance in an MUC zone, they wouldn't have those costs, and there wouldn't be any sort of an issue with regard to what it is they are asking for. And I believe the geotechnical report acknowledged the substantial mitigation that might be required, but that was not included as part of the packet. That wasn't their purview, but the gentleman that wrote it said there are issues, and I, of course, was very curious as to, there's this, as you said, the site is unstable and that there are other issues, and it seems to me that that has a lot to do with, suitability, and there wasn't any information in the packet that addressed that.
Are you interested in seeing more on the geotech?
No, the geotech was fine. It had to do with the mitigation, with the fact that it's on a landfill, and that there are.
Except that located part of the site isn't part of the landfill. There might be
There's some.
dirt moved there, but there's no garbage there.
Yeah, well, we don't really know all that.
Yeah, I do. I grew up
So,
here.
Yes, I know. I
I
saw
looted it more than once.
I saw
for
it at,
go-kart parts.
in a certain configuration, but it's one of those parts of town that there aren't many parts of Oregon City that scare me, but that's one of the parts that scares me.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we will wait for the next meeting. Is there
Okay,
any
I
motion?
move to continue this meeting until date certain of January 26th, not July, January 26th.
Oh, please, don't say July.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and second to, by Damon and Zach, to continue this item to a date and time certain, which is 7 p.m. on the 26th of January.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Mabey?
Aye.
Chair McGriff? Vice
Aye.
Chair McGriff?
Yes, Vice Chair.
Well, great, thank you. And just so everyone's aware, the record's still open. It's still accepting public comment as well as people can come testify at the hearing on the 26th if they would like to, or submit written testimony up to that point.
That was fast.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go Ducks.
So do we have any communications, Tony?
I'll keep it quick. I think the main thing was you were aware that with the Lima Falls Legacy Project, we originally had a date of March 15th to submit our financing plan and showing public interest for the Riverwalk to the governor's office for the $5 million in compliance with the appropriations. That was accelerated up to December 15th. We did receive a letter from the Regional Solutions Office representing the governor that they have accepted, and we've met the conditions for that $5 million. So that would then end up going to State Parks, which is the department that'll be administering the money, and then that would flow through to Metro as we begin the Riverwalk design process. We hope to have an RFP out the week of the 19th of this month, and essentially would be looking at what we're calling 10% drawing. So looking at the feasibility of the route, addressing some of the, just gaining more knowledge about where that Riverwalk can be constructed, and then general design and location of that. We were able to successfully negotiate with Portland General Electric for an access easement over their property, as well as with Mr. Heigerken for a 120-foot wide easement across the entirety of his property. He also agreed to bring $900,000 to that design and engineering process, as well as 20% of the operation and maintenance costs once it is constructed. We are also going to begin putting out.
What does that mean?
What's what mean?
He's going to bring the money after it's constructed or during it's
The
constructed?
$900,000 will go towards the design and engineering.
Okay.
And then there's an additional agreement for 20% of the ongoing operation and maintenance once it's completed. And as you may recall, as part of our agreement with the other partners, is the City of Oregon City would be taking over the operation and maintenance once it is completed. So we're negotiating with Eco Northwest to begin looking at how do we do that? How do we pay for that? What are funding opportunities that make sure we can meet our obligations for that operation and maintenance of that facility once it is completed, as well as looking at what other opportunities there are should most likely additional public investments in that property be necessary for infrastructure or parking garage or something like that. So really walking through, originally when we started looking at the property, we identified about 25 funding opportunities, and now it's really, okay, can we focus that down to 2, 3, 4 that then we can start focusing on, whether that be discussions about existing urban renewal, new urban renewal, general obligation bond, other funding opportunities that may be there and available for local jurisdictions to help cover some of those infrastructure costs. Start having those discussions in education now, so that when the time comes to negotiate those agreements, we're not scrambling figuring out what do we want to do as a local agency.
So would there be, just as a for instance, let's say that, Donald Trump decided this was the best project he'd ever seen, and in exchange for his $5 million, he wants it to be called, the Trump Riverwalk. Is
naming rights?
Yeah, is the city? Yes, I was going to ask. Is the city open to anything like naming rights? You never know. Somebody.
You never know.
Somebody might be out there.
It may be.
I mean, I don't know if they'll call it the Trump Walk, but
Right.
The Moto Walk?
The Moto, yeah. Well, no. But, it's just obviously an
I
opportunity.
think part of the, one of the decisions we made early on was that a vast majority of this money is going to come through what the public agencies, local, federal, state, can put together to fund it. And that also means that we maintain control on decisions concerning use, programming, because we do see it as a public amenity and a public benefit, so we wanted to make sure that we maintain that ability moving forward in perpetuity. So I suppose we certainly could sign over, naming rights.
Yeah, well, it'd have to be enough money to make it worth our while.
True. But, so we haven't gotten to that kind of detail. It's
I
more
know.
looking at what
Just
those
an idea.
opportunities would be.
Way down the line. So
Well,
what sort of general, if you can discuss it, general qualifications are you looking for a project team that would undertake this particular activity? I mean,
Pretty multifaceted in
obviously
terms of
have a keen understanding of what's going on.
right.
And that sort of thing.
And we're going to take the lead and start an RFP to start look at some of the archaeological study of the property, so that can start to educate and inform the decisions on route, or if there are certain artifacts that should be incorporated, how they can be incorporated, if they can be moved, if they can't be moved, to get this started, because it's going to take us probably a good 3 months to bring on the team for the actual Riverwalk design. But you're looking at from parks designers, public access to infrastructure, structural, archaeological, historical. We're going to have hydrological in there, obviously. So it's going to be multifaceted.
Well, I'll bring you an article. I just got my National Trust magazine, and they were talking about an interesting partnership between some archaeologists and this metal detecting group, and how they were finding I think it's part of James Madison's estate. And even though it's not close to his home, Montpelier, it's a little ways, it's like a mile away, but they are finding all kinds of stuff. And they said that, just what I glanced at it while I was fixing dinner, was this is a very unique but desirable partnership. And that these people, most people think of people who have metal detectors, well, they're just out there, looking for stuff. But apparently some of the groups that are out there really are focused on sort of this heritage conservation. And I said, wow, that's kind of an interesting idea.
Has any progress been made in establishing a nonprofit foundation?
There's another meeting on February the 2nd for the Friends of
We're
Land
still
and
working
Water.
through with the creation of the Friends group. I think I may have told you both Oregon City and Metro have each agreed to put in $25,000 each to try and kickstart that Friends group. Really, it's trying to get that 501c3 status and getting that all set up. But also, what is their role? Can we define scope and responsibilities and try to avoid creep way outside of that?
Of it, yeah.
They're continuing to meet and having those discussions and trying to figure out the best way to move forward. We've been on the other side trying to identify groups if we could fall under their existing nonprofit status in an interim until we can get the paperwork done with the federal government to receive that 501c3 status to receive donations for the property.
Yeah,
Yes, we're still moving forward
I know the date,
with
but
it.
I don't know. They haven't said where it's going to be yet.
Yeah, well, it's
Sometimes
just
it takes a year and a half-ish.
They have really tightened up on the requirements for 501(c)(3)s ever since a couple of those.
What if you put liberty or freedom in?
Yes, boom. Yeah. So it's the Liberty River Walk, now on the project. So,
freedom.
yeah, the Freedom Walk.
There you go.
So still moving forward, trying to get that going as quickly as we can with the group that we have. We also sent out to several electeds, governor, federal delegation, local, state delegation to almost be like founding members, kind of on the left column.
There you
of
go, the
the
advisory
memo.
group.
Yeah,
There you
exactly. So we're working on that as well.
Social media
Yeah.
Social media.
Well, I know.
worldwide.
I think it may be the 3rd of February, the Oregon Heritage Commission is meeting in Oregon City. And they're going to hopefully vote on the creation of a state heritage area for us. But I, of course, talking to staff, and I was on their website, because they're going to meet at the Trail Center, but they're going to come early to do a tour, and it's, everybody says, yes, we're all working on it. But I said, well, it's less than a month away. What are you guys doing? So anyway, that's going to happen in Oregon City here, too. And I'm sure there'll be a spotlight a little bit on what we're doing at the Legacy Project, because they're going to be touring the locks and the core museum there, and kind of doing a little loop. And if it's a good day, maybe they'll actually get out on the river. But
So we've contacted with a company called Brink. They do social media. They do website. They're going to update our website that they're initially rolling out. They're going to help with both national and international, getting the information out for the RFP for the Riverwalk. So that's going to be the first task that they're about to undertake for us here in the next week or so.
Denise brings up a good point, this phrase, they're out there. Well, they are out there. You got to know who they are. I mean, you could be inundated with interest on this thing, and I think one of the important things is, in developing these interest groups, is the definition of roles.
that's one of the things
Really?
we talked about that at the first meeting.
Because if you don't, there's going to be smoke and all over the place, just whispers and undercurrents and this and that, and it gets sloppy, and it also gets hard to deal with.
Well, one of the biggest questions that came up at the Friends meeting that I attended, where they talked about rules, is that we have, the Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation, we have the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, we have the Willamette Falls Area Coalition, and we have the group that's trying to create the heritage area, and so there's a lot of confusion because it's all Willamette. And the question that was brought up at that meeting was, how do we make sure that we are not overstepping our bounds of our roles and also not stepping on other people's toes, but also continue to make the group be collaborative, so that nobody's come up with the the answer that fits in the box yet. But it did get brought up, because that was one of the first things I thought of. So you got all those Willamette Falls groups, you got Mooch, you got this group, you got this group, you got this group, and everybody's kind of doing this little piece. So how does this Friends group fit into the larger picture?
We've also got to keep in mind that the ultimate responsibility of authorizing and paying for this is with the city commission. Ultimately, they're going to have to assume that responsibility, and it's very easy to throw your hat in the ring when you don't have any responsibility. But when you have to cast that vote and authorize it and fund it, so those roles have to, those organizations have to recognize that whatever contribution they have is going to trickle up to the commission, who ultimately will use that information and make a decision. I feel very strongly about that, because they can very easily get bumped out of the discussion. But ultimately, because of the law and the way the city charter reads, they've got to make the decision. That might be over fine pointing, making too fine a point of it, but
That's good.
really, so responsibility and roles.
So do we have anything else coming up on the agenda for the 26th?
Just tire.
Okay, well, at least it won't be jam-packed. That's
No, it won't be.
what happens when we
I don't
had
think
all
there- I
those
don't think there's any-
continuance. It was
Chair,
like we
Vice
had,
Chair.
Oh, yeah.
everything started pancaking on top of each other, and I think we were a little overwhelmed.
If I know, we'd like to do the election for the chair and the vice chair, but it'd be nice if all 7 were here to do that.
Yeah.
So if all 6 aren't, we may slide it again.
Who isn't here? I nominate.
Nominate them while they're not here.
That's what I was
Nice.
thinking. It'll be on the record, so.
I've got to say, I have never heard the word specificity
Specificity.
read like that fast without a mistake, so I know where my vote's going.
It's very embarrassing, but I was at a city commission meeting not too long ago, and I was sitting where Ed could see me and I was saying everything he was saying. I almost made him crack up. I didn't mean to. I didn't realize I was doing it until all of a sudden he was saying, and I looked over at him and he looked at me and he looked away really quickly. I thought, uh-oh. So I stopped doing it. It's amazing how you think you don't remember something.
People are always watching.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.